Okay, we're gonna make sure we have a quorum. Audrey is here, Lori is here, Michaela. I just saw her virtually.
I am present.
Okay, perfect. Michaela's here. Jeannie,
She's absent with her.
oh, absent, okay, Sharon?
Yeah.
Okay, hi. Woman,
Zooey.
Zooey,
She virtual.
I'm here.
okay, perfect. Amy Wren? Virtual. I'm glad you did. I'm glad you did have your glasses on. Sandifer?
She's absent with friends.
Brenda?
Here.
Okay. And Michelle Terry? Okay, we do have a quorum. Okay, we're gonna call the order. And I did not see an on-site packet, is that correct?
Madam Chair, there is no answer packet.
Okay, perfect. And any additions or revisions to the agenda?
I don't know.
No, okay. And then we do have announcements. I would like to personally thank the rotating members who are coming off the practice committee with their service and helping us here at the State Board of Nursing. And we have for Sharon a nice certificate. And thank you for your service of being here with us and greatly appreciate it. As well as Tawny Sandifer. We'll get this to you as well. Thank you for your service for the practice committee and the State Board of Nursing. And Zooey Holloman, we appreciate your service as well. And another Jeannie Gerstenkorn. I'm sorry, I totally butchered that name, but thank you very much for your service. It's greatly appreciated from the Kansas State Board of Nursing for helping out on the practice committee. Okay, and now we have a motion for the approval of the minutes from June 13th of 2023.
I move to approve the March 21st, 2023 minutes as written.
Second, Sharp.
All in favor? Say aye.
Aye.
Okay, any opposed? No. All right, all right, unfinished business. We have the RN LPM scope of practice. Components and nursing comparison chart draft.
So yes, this is one of the dailies, beginning on page 6 of your packet is the most current draft. It was mentioned to bring it back to the committee so that you can see it again. Look to see if there are further edits that you want to do, comments. Sharon?
I have a statement for the advocacy, which I forgot to, I hadn't sent to you.
Okay.
That we could consider putting in there if we wanted to.
Okay.
Do you want me to read it out?
You
Or
can.
just go through it and when you get there.
I don't know that we're gonna go through it line
Okay.
by line, so.
I think for advocacy, and I think it would be appropriate for both RNs and LPNs, because I think LPNs can be advocates as well for patient care. My first choice would be I came up with two verbiages: advocates for practices and policies that promote optimal health outcomes for individuals and populations. Or you could go, if you don't want to use advocates as the first word, provide individual and or system advocacy to promote optimal health outcomes for individuals or populations, either one of those.
Committee members, is there any discussion on adding?
Both of them are very direct, and I think they're really useful.
Okay, I think that it highlights something that we do on a regular basis for our patients, and also brings in population health, because sometimes we do it at a legislative level.
Right.
Mhm. I'll give those to you and you can,
I can add them and then bring them back.
whichever way you want, or
And then also in your packet on page 12, I just put in also, and it's been in the newsletter, it's, we've been, put this out. Both execs from, KSBN and KSNA, the former KSNA director, worked on the differentiation between KSBN and KSNA, and I put that in just for the practice committee's reference, so that you can see that those things are also on I believe it's also on the website. But I know it's been in the newsletter, so.
So a question that I had being a public member, non-nurse, so for instance, on standard 9 and 10. Where there is nothing on the LPN, is that because there's nothing specifically referenced? It's on respectful and equitable practice and communication, which is centered around HIPAA and confidentiality, et cetera.
Standard 8 and 9.
Standard 9 and
Okay,
10,
great.
sorry.
Yeah, because 8, that's that chair and just kind of back.
Right.
For 9 and 10, I'm still looking, the Nurse Practice Act for Standard 9. The only thing that I could find that kind of references this in any way was what was listed under the cultural factors only for the LMHT, not for the nurse. So I don't know if there's something else that we can reference, but this is all I can currently find. Unless the committee can find something as well, and standard 10, we do have, it's for communication, so there are some things there. I guess in standard 9, it flips to the second page, and there is one for applying curriculum knowledge gained in the nursing school, so I'm not sure if that's relative to their practice, but I'm sure that they have to. Flipped it. The Adobe, there was an upgrade. So next time I'll make sure you don't have to.
Like on standard 10 where it talks about confidentiality, social media, things like that. I mean, that could carry over to LPN.
Yeah, as well, certainly.
and I think respectfulness would apply to LPNs as well.
Yeah.
Okay,
I believe it. I know we do that in the RN program. They do that, some type of review. I'm assuming they do the same for
As far as,
LPN for respectful and equitable practice,
yeah.
cultural diversity. like-
Yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
okay. So just carry that language over, okay.
Not in the LPN program. Looking at the LPNs, does that sound reasonable?
They do, and then employment, areas go with diversity
Mhm.
on a yearly basis.
Yes.
We review diversity.
Okay. Any other discussion? I'm sorry. Gets me on task. Any other discussion?
On 10 where it says administering nursing services, what does that exactly mean? Like, are you talking like delegating tasks? Because it says like not within our scope of practice with LPN, so I'm just trying to figure out what that worded means.
I actually looked it up in the dictionary,
Uh-huh.
and the first definition is management of,
Okay, okay,
so I think this.
that's what like it was,
But if, to be clear, it could be administrating. Because I think this is aiming at the administration responsibilities, is that correct?
It's been so long since we started this chart. that I'm trying to- I know we pulled the standards and things from the ANA competencies and the code of ethics and things, so I'd have to go back and reread that section to find out, but I would think that it's more administrative as far as like more of management of nursing services is what I'm thinking too. It's why that was a delineation to, the LVN doesn't really have that function.
That was
certain
my
roles.
interest.
Cause like assistant director of nursing can't be an LPN. In the
certain
long-term
roles.
care,
Okay,
yeah,
okay, so maybe we need to define that then a little bit more.
not a director of nursing, but an assistant director of nursing.
That's not director.
So maybe it would be within the scope of practice of an LPN under the direction of or
Of an RN,
supervision
like
of
you
an
have to
RN.
have.
Under
an
an
RN,
RN,
yes.
okay.
Long-term care roles are way different than hospitals, so.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. Okay,
And would it always be an RN or would it sometimes be a physician?
It could be both. I mean, we don't usually see a lot of physicians, like they're usually a director, but they're not the ones that are there.
Okay.
do some facilities not have an RN?
You have to have an RN
Okay.
that is in, like, in that director role, whether they're in the building all the time. You
Is
have
the
to have
director,
some-
is the director role in-house or how are they?
They just not necessarily, they just have to be accessible. That'd be something like, and it could, because it's an RN, a nurse practitioner. We have multiple, okay, so.
Okay.
Sorry, just food for
No,
thought.
no, it's good, it's good. Okay, so I can add that piece then to you as well, and bring that back to you.
Were there any other additional areas we should be? Or is it, it looks filled out to me, I think, as I look at it. There's not any open gaps.
Standard 14 is the only one.
Oh,
that doesn't
standard
has
14,
anything,
okay.
I think, for
Okay.
the LPN.
It's filled out from the RN side and talking about the health.
Mhm.
For the LPN, yeah,
I mean, we're required CEUs as well.
that's true.
Mhm. Mhm.
It's interesting that you phrase it scholar.
That's how it is in the.
It
in
is.
Competence, yeah,
Um,
because I see LPNs who move through the spectrum of nursing.
you know,
so-
we do patient education, and I don't know that that's what you're talking about. Is that what you're talking about?
I think that it's more about your, as an LPN, your movement, your education for yourself, for your.
We do, yes,
And you
we
mentioned
definitely
these, and
have
you
to
do-
keep up with what we're,
Any certifications that you have, things like. if you
well,
could
the
hide some of those-
certifications, but you know, as new things become
Yeah.
competencies, because, well, just, you know, in talking about the new COVIDs, vaccines,
No,
the new RSV, you know, there's just and primarily your LPNs are the ones that are delivering those medications frontline. So yes, we are constantly on the
front line.
front line for the knowledge base for delivering those.
And then like non-acute settings, yeah, and like primary care.
Yes,
and things
yes,
like
and
that,
the
yeah.
non-acute, yes.
Non-acute setting, okay.
Well, and I see this also in addressing research and the participation that nurses have in even conducting research into what best practice and advancing best practice through research of their own practice and their expertise in that. And so, you know, there are many scholarly inquiries out there at doctoral levels and everything that are advancing the knowledge of what best practice is.
Very true, very true.
And for nurses, best done by nurses.
So, we're going people in health and doctors asked this question.
Well, I often wonder if some of the questions we are required to ask of our patients aren't part of a collection of data
Mhm.
or an overall.
So is that the
determination.
offices to check when you're going in? Yeah.
Okay, any other? Areas we should speak about?
We'll add those and then bring them back in December.
And then that completes the chart, correct? Okay. So we will complete.
I think after about a year and a half.
I'm sure they'll still be comments later on.
I'm sure.
So we will complete the chart and one last look.
Maybe
Yes.
we can pass it with edits.
Yeah.
Approved with edits.
Yeah, approved by that. Yes,
Seven coming in.
sounds great to me. Okay. We're gonna move on to number 2, which is KR 60-7-111, reporting certain misdemeanor convictions.
So this was tabled from June, I think, because of the regulations that we were gonna be looking at for the
Okay.
new requirements. But I also attached 60-3-113 as a, because you wanted to look at the language on 60-7-111 to make sure it kind of mimics the 60-3-113 as far as reporting misdemeanor convictions for the chief, which is the nurse. So I think they're, so as you review those for the new regs, perhaps do that at the same time. And if you want Carol to give the spiel about the new regulations, or we can get there when we get there, and then you can look at it all at that
So
time.
is the 60-7 that LMHT's?
The LMHT language, yeah, is up for review for, by this committee this year.
Gotcha.
And so I think the goal was to kind of like look at the language of the one for the nurses to see if it could mirror the one at LMHT.
Now, as I say, and the nurses one, are we gonna have to do both of them with this new review? Okay.
Yeah.
Then might as well
I
just-
we can just put them off all together at the same
I was gonna
time.
say.
And I can make note of that to where when they come up in your committee packet, to make sure they're together, so you can kind of look at them both together at that time.
Instead of, oh yeah, remember when we did this 3 months
Right.
ago?
Yes.
We would,
And I
sounds
think
like we would appreciate that.
Yeah.
Okay,
I think the 30-day limit, tightening that within 30 days from the date of conviction is what
Mhm.
we wanted added into.
right, I think that's what we wanting to add.
It was so open-ended in 7.
So yes, please, bring those together. Right, and then practice calls, updates.
So in your packet on page 17, the volume and type of calls is still consistent. And looking at incoming requests, I'm looking at those. I took over the practice calls in July. The investigator that I had that did those throughout COVID did a phenomenal job keeping up with all the changes in the executive orders and things too. So, and things changed all the time. So it was nice to have one person that we could just say, these are the changes, and she could relate those to the practice calls. So she has now gone to part-time status. So I have assumed the practice calls, and I can say that they are looking to see how can I align some education like in the newsletter, or if there are certain things that we could bring here, and then you could mention a resource or, you know, another avenue for us to be able to kind of get people their information. Because as the Board of Nursing, we're not licensed attorneys, we don't give legal advice. So we have to make sure that we stay within that. I did also have 2 staff attend that KSMO School Nurse Conference, the new nurse orientation day, and I mentioned that in June, and they thought that it was very beneficial, and we have received several calls since the school nurse conference, and so I passed those questions off to them. So They did mention, and maybe Sharon, you might have heard this, but the school nurse manual is from 2017. And they said that there was some discussion at that meeting that they may be re-reviewing that, and so I don't know if that would
Well,
come
I'm
to
not sure.
KSBN.
I'm not sure what you mean by the school nurse manual. There's the medication administration
Maybe that's it.
manual, and that's, I think, from 2017. And that's
Okay.
specific to the administration of medications in
medications.
Kansas schools.
Okay,
And so it's probably due for review again.
for a review.
Mhm.
And there was, the previous practice specialist was a reviewer. From what I saw, but I'm thinking I would bring it to the practice committee. And Carol, and probably our general counsel.
Well, and yes, you might have some of the school nurses from KSNO and that put that together initially, and we did the edits, Chris and Tuck and Cindy Gilmore, I think were two of the authors, since we're so familiar with school nurse practice and all those legal issues. Be good to have them probably initiate maybe the updates and that, and then send that to you so that you're able to review it.
Right, so I'm just giving you fair notice that it might be coming.
Mhm.
Okay. I
Yeah.
don't know when, but they did mention that there was that, so it must have been the guidelines or something, for medication administration.
Mhm.
They told me manual, I was like, I don't know,
Yeah.
so, okay.
And then I just want to make one comment on the practice called data. When I was looking at this, at least from a nurse practitioner perspective, potentially giving what those calls are to like ongoing conferences that we have here in the state of Kansas. Maybe the people who are educating those who practice, to address their concerns, give more of a lead from, I know KPIN does a wonderful conference, it's coming up in January, as well as some of the schools do conferences as well, not only for NPs, but also RNs, LPNs, I would assume have some type of a conference, state, local, to help educate and get those educative highlights addressed. I didn't know if anybody felt like that would be beneficial.
I
Try to
think
cut down
so.
on the calls.
Yeah.
It was excellent. That's me. Well, we can try to utilize our friends in the state of Kansas.
I don't specifically know of any LPN groups that do.
No, but it would be helpful.
Like, I mean, I do for nursing home, like, hospital administrator or nursing home administration and things like that. Like, we have conferences, but not specifically geared for LPNs.
So. for-
Because we're not represented by KSNA,
Okay.
only RNs are. Just a thought.
Well, I learned something, okay, so.
But from your perspective, do you think people would be open to say, hey, this is what we're receiving at the state level? Would you?
Oh, I think so. I think a lot of LPNs would go for like continuing education credits and just different education because we don't have that
Okay.
currently. Or at least not that I'm aware of.
Yeah, I think they'd be open to it.
I know we've talked about this many times since I've even been here a very short time, but I just have to register as a public member my ongoing concern about the number of IV therapy calls and inquiries, and just how it doesn't seem like anybody in the state is taking the lead on managing the safety of that for public members. And I know everybody nobody wants to touch it. It's a hot potato, but there's a lot on here between the medical spas, Botox fillers, and the IV hydration and vitamin administration. It's kind of alarming to me.
We're seeing more and more of those popping up.
There's discussion, and there was a webinar from the FDA and the Federal Trade Commission. I want to say it was the same time as our board retreat, so I wasn't able to listen in on it, but I had people listening into that. And it was good, and we got the transcript from that and things. So I think that there are people looking at those things. It's just that there's no clear guidelines and no clear direction. So I do, when I get those calls, I do refer them obviously to a licensed attorney to help with whatever they need. But then, you know, they want permission to give things and it's like, we can't do that. And then one said that we were gonna be regulating their business, and I had to explain how KSBN has authority to license, educate, discipline the license, not the business. So there's a lot of confusion. I think there are some things coming, but I don't.
Might be at the federal level.
Yeah.
One question I had, this raised for me too, is when I was on the Board of Healing Arts, there was some provision about essentially what I would call false advertising or overstating claims
And
of
that's
cure.
why, that's what,
And do we have anything like that in their nurse practice? That your people who are, I just sat in on a very informal presentation from an Ivy Health group that was extraordinarily confident in their ability to cure menopause and all kinds of other things. And I just wonder what the recourse is as a public member to try to make sure some of these expectations are managed or being, you know, these pronouncements are a little more responsible, but
the public could file a complaint with the Board of Nursing, but we'd have to have jurisdiction, so we'd have to have a licensee identified.
Mhm.
And then as far as a violation of the Nurse Practice Act, we would look to see if they're practicing within their scope, or if there's false advertisement, or if they're soliciting a business. There's a regulation, I think, for that. We rarely use that. We don't hardly ever see it, but that might be where we fall and see if there's been grounds for discipline based off that. It's something that the investigative committee would have to review. But it starts with a complaint from a patient. We can't just,
it has to be a patient, not a consumer or public member.
we just have to have something that's on written form that they want to say, yes, this is what's happening, because when they file a complaint, there is the opportunity to swear to the contents of the complaint. And so therefore, if they do that, then it makes us then really look at the complaint language, but you're also then saying that you're not wanting to be anonymous. You're willing to testify to that content of that in the complaint. So there's kind of like, you would work with the investigator at that point as the person who's filing the complaint.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I just might add something here. When I listened to the transcript for that meeting that Linda's referring to, one of the things that they focused on was the safety of these mobile IV clinics, if you will. And many times when they were going in and, maybe censuring them, it was because they were doing things that were unsafe. And so I think a lot of times we'll see when the FDA or the federal government steps in, it will be because it's a situation that's unsafe and they receive complaints because of that. And so just keep that in mind too, from the standpoint that they're looking at it from the standpoint that sometimes the practice is just not safe. They gave the example of adding medications or vitamins to IV bags, and they were doing it in an unsterile environment. And so they really wanted to lock down on that.
Thank you.
Any additional comments? Questions? Okay, so now we're gonna move on to new business, and we have with us, KDHE Lisa Horn, and she'll be, giving us a presentation on the public health scope of practice toolkit for nurses and unlicensed assistant personnel. Nice to have you with us, Sasha.
Nice to be here. Thank you for having me. I am a public health nurse specialist with the KDHE local public health team. And our whole goal is to be a liaison between KDHE and the county health departments. Anything they need, they're trying to track someone down at KDHE or maybe even another state agency, we work to help them with that. We also house Kansas Train. Some of you might be familiar with that learning platform. And so tied into that is a lot of technical assistance. If you haven't taken it, needs to use, we have a radon course that we worked on with our radiation program, free. I think it's a 2-hour CNE course that we launched earlier this year. So we get a lot of questions from health departments, as you guys do, about what can we do within our scope of practice. Most of the time, it's something we have to refer to the Nurse Practice Act. But there are some things that with, if you worked at a local health department, you know what an RN can do, what an LPN can do. The pandemic has really shifted, as you guys know, the workforce, whether it's a hospital, long-term care, and of course, public health. Health departments are really struggling to find RNs, but the work still needs to be done. And so they have gone to hiring LPNs. They've considered even hiring medical assistants, but they are unclear that some of the duties that have typically been held by RNs are not necessarily within the scope for LPNs or MAs, especially MAs. So we put this toolkit together. The Kansas Association of Local Health Departments also have been getting requests. They're, kind of probably like the Kansas State Nurses Association, sort of a separate, nonprofit group, but we work really closely with them. And so I said, okay, I'll do it. No one else volunteered the team. So I feel like that was a part of nursing school that just really stuck with me, delegation and, we're working closely with LPNs and other assistive personnel, like CNAs, that sort of thing. And so I guess maybe I do have some interest in the area. So it was lucky me. So anyway, if, bottom line, this document just takes the statutes word for word, puts it into a document, so that people can refer to this. The disclaimer that our attorney wrote is very much, please talk to your local counsel. This is just guidance. It's very much, kind of hands off. We've got this document for you, but before you make any hiring decisions, or if you have any kind of questions at all, it's a good idea to talk to your local attorney. So that's on page 4. We've got important links. One of those includes the Board of Nursing website. We've got the ANA's nursing scope of practice. And then all of the, the places to go to the statutes, the Revisor Statutes website, forms and applications regarding nursing practice. And then basically we just kind of boil down who we're talking about in the document. We're talking about CNAs, community health workers, CMAs, interns and nursing students and other non-medical staff. And a lot of the stuff that we learned in nursing school, how you delegate, the 5 rights of nursing delegation, right task, right services, right person, right supervision. And then how to know what can be delegated to an LPN versus what needs to be handled by an APRN or an RN. So just kind of that basic stuff. And then we were able to kind of plop in that great new information about the expanded scope for advanced practice registered nurses. And a lot of this information we took from the Colorado Public Health Association. They developed a really nice guide. Theirs even has like job descriptions for any kind of position you might see at a health department. It was helpful, but we decided to just keep it simple. And so we left the position descriptions out, but we did borrow their health department delegation chart, which is on page 8. And basically tailored it to our use here in Kansas, kind of what you would see at a health department in Kansas. So just, you can kind of see that algorithm there. And then for page 9, Also, this was taken from the CPHA with their permission. It's very similar to the decision tree that Linda put together, but we have felt that putting this in tandem with the decision tree was really important, because with this being a new document from the BON and being very detailed, I think it's a nice companion to the delegation authority algorithm on page 9. And then probably the teeth of this document, as far as the research that, was involved pulling in information from statutes and various public health programs, that's on page 12. And so in that first column, you'll see the health department duty. Now, you're not going to see health department nurses starting IVs, so that's not even on the list in the first column. But obviously, you were going to see them do vaccinations. A lot of health departments offer family planning services, so starting birth control and providing the education related to that, or administering birth control shots, every 3 months. So the Title X program, which funds family planning services, has some strict information about who can do what. So one of the differences between like an LPN's role in a family planning visit versus an RN, if it's a new pill start, the RN is the one that needs to start the patient on that pill and provide that teaching and education. If that patient's returning for a refill of her pills, that's fine for an LPN to conduct that visit. Same with Depo-Provera. It's the first time the woman's receiving the Depo-Provera shot. That would be started by the APRN or RN, and then for refills later on, that could be done by an LPN. The WIC program also has similar information about who can do what within WIC, and also a lot of info that RNs can't do in the sense that it's only a registered dietitian can do certain visits within WIC. So that's on here too. Can be healthy. Some of you might be familiar with those visits. Lots of pediatricians do them in other family practice clinics, but a lot of health departments do them. And currently, Medicaid says it is okay for an RN or an APRN in a public health setting to do those, as long as they have that oversight by physicians. So in this case, it would be the medical consultant who signs the standing orders. And that's kind of our big thing with our team, is when we get questions like this from the health department, make sure that your attending physician, your medical consultant is okay with all of this, and there's documentation to support that he or she has signed a standing order to reflect all of the tasks that your personnel are doing in your health department, that they're okay with. And that if they're reviewed. I personally, when I talk to people, I tell them, at least every year, if you can, go through the standing orders and make sure. And we know with vaccines, I mean, goodness, we've had so many of the changes to that lately. Health departments need to have standing orders for various vaccines. Might as well look at your other procedures too. So, yeah, so that grid is really kind of the meat and potatoes. We've got footnotes, just linking to all of the sources. The big thing is the medical assistance. I really learned a lot when I was doing the research on this. We really can't recommend to health departments that MAs can be hired, because most health departments don't have doctors on site. And so the language from the Medical Assistance Association states that they need to have a physician on site to do certain tasks. And so really it's just kind of an issue if a health department decides to go that route. But we would tell them, talk to your attorney. Good look at this, but talk to your attorney. So I think that's really the gist of the document. If you have any questions at all, I'm happy to answer them. Open to any edits that you all see fit. We'd like to, keep this. We'd like to look at this every year as well, and keep track of any potential changes that you all have, and make those edits as we need to.
I have one question under scope of practice decision tree for the RN.
Okay, Linda, I might need your help on that one.
Okay, under the unsure, it has a little arrow that says discuss with nursing administration, may want to consult with board. Which board is that? Is
Board of nursing or?
That's us. Board, that's our answer.
okay,
So maybe just add Board of Nursing there.
Or you say KSBN a little lower, maybe.
KSBN, so that they know what board they're calling.
Mm-hmm.
And also, you know, is KSBN understanding they're gonna get those calls for practice for,
We already do.
okay, very good.
Just had a quick question. Is there any room for psychological services to be, I love this, this grid. This is awesome. It's so explanatory, and I'm just wondering, is there any room for psychological services and a column for licensed clinical social workers?
So typically, health departments do not offer psychological services. They will refer. There are some health departments that hire social workers. I see them most in the maternal child health program, which is a home visiting program. Trying to think, that's like the main program that you'd see a social worker in. We thought about putting an extra column in for them, but that wasn't where we were getting most of the questions, to be honest, from the health departments.
I think the larger health departments can afford a social worker for there because they have more population, but since Kansas is mostly rural, the smaller surrounding counties cannot afford their own independent social worker, so. Are there co-ops that they could partner with that would have the social worker if they needed?
I haven't heard of any. I know that we have some health departments that co-op for WIC, like they'll share a dietitian, the dietitian will, rotate from county to county. So, yeah, I'm not familiar with any shared use of a social worker per se.
Aren't some getting funding for home visitors for elder senior safety checks and for home visit programs? I don't know what they're, I just know the one in Iowa is doing some of that.
Yeah, some may be. I think most of those are tied to the area councils on aging. The health department I worked at, like in the early 80s, there was a lot of money for elder care and home visiting, and they were one of the last in the state to still be in operation about 5 years ago. And then they finally decided to close down that senior case management program. And I think a lot of it was because the services were being duplicated, like area on aging, agency on aging was doing it. That county has a visiting nurses association. I think they were filling the gap a little bit too.
And that's where I was
Oh,
thinking
go
in the case management arena, where you have that entire interdisciplinary team. And sometimes the lines can get blurred about what the social worker can do versus the RN and MAs. So that's the arena I was thinking into. But if it's not used in the health department, that.
I think it's something we could certainly keep in the back of our minds for the future, because as more funding is directed in different ways, certainly behavioral health, we know that more funding is probably going to come down, and I hope it does. That could be a column that we probably would want to drop in later if it seems
Absolutely.
And I'll definitely make a note of that. Yeah.
I was surprised that the RN gave the first step of Rivera.
Yeah, and it's because it's a new medicine. And
It's a new medicine to the patient.
right. And so the family planning program, the way they look at it is because there's extra teaching and education involved. It needs to be either done by the RN or the nurse practitioner. A lot of times, like the health department I worked at, then the patient would come in, she'd be there maybe for her very first annual exam, and she'd decide on that visit if the timing was right to go ahead and do depo. Just a lot of times the nurse practitioner was the one that would give it, but sometimes she would have to return, depending on where her period was at, to get the first depo, and then the RN would still have to do it. But then, but the health department I worked at also, we did not have LPNs, but it's been 4 years since I've I've been at the local level, and we know the landscape has changed a lot. Hiring is so difficult. So they're just trying to figure out ways to fill the staffing shortage, but make sure that everyone's working within their scope and adhering to what the feds want to receive the funding for these various public health programs.
Lisa, what is it that you want this committee to look at and to do?
Really just, is it okay? Wanted you to know it exists, and if you have any edits. So that's the big thing. We're hoping to present this at the CALD is gonna have I think it's like a half day presentation or series of presentations at the Kansas Association of Counties annual conference. And so that we were hoping to release it then, and that's going to be in early December. So health departments have been, really nagging us for a while on this. So I feel like you with the stuff you've been working on, it's a long process getting it out the door. But it's an evolving document. It's not ever done. I see this as something that will always be fluid.
I applaud you for the document. I think it was very well written, well researched, and
Thanks. It's been great working with Linda too, because she also worked in public health. And so we speak the same language. And I think having worked at a health department, you kind of understand the programs and the requirements and where to look for the information. So,
and having been one that did this same process for the school nurses with the delegation, and I was pleased when I came up to the part about, and if you're practicing in a school, refer to this, and I was like, oh my goodness, and I clicked on it, and it was like, oh good, it's not a separate document, it's our document. So.
Yes, we absolutely wanted to make that clear, because we do have a few health departments that do school nursing services. So we wanted to make that really clear, because that's like a whole other area.
Right.
So is there any check on the health departments as far as their medical consultants to see that they are reviewing their policies and their standing orders, and do they meet with staff periodically? I mean, is that part of their contracts? And do you have health departments who don't have that?
So it's really kind of, because we're a decentralized public health system, we don't have a whole lot of play in that. We can make those suggestions. But as far as, checking to make sure that Ford County Health Department, this is the year, did you make sure your medical consultant, renewed their contract, and are they doing this, and this, and if they looked at these standing orders, that's not something that we do, but we tell them it's best practice. Yeah.
And then from a committee standpoint, I would like to have Charles review this. And I would like to I appreciate your presentation today, but now that I know kind of where you're coming from, I looked at it before, but now, knowing more so, and I think other people on the committee now knowing more so where this information is coming from, to take a deeper delve into it and to really, get our red pens out if need be. And really take a look at it as well. From that standpoint, I don't think we'll make the December meeting or just your unveiling.
Okay.
Because our next meeting isn't until December.
Okay.
And Charles is our general
And
counsel.
Charles is our
Sure.
Yes.
Okay.
But we're not taking action on this, right? Because it's their
No,
document, we're just.
Yeah, this is just a presentation day. Did anybody else have any other questions? With our first look through.
I'm just looking at some of it where it says stop LPN. I must have appropriate supervision. And I realize it's different in the health department, but a lot of areas, LPNs are a lot more independent practice.
Great.
Our RNs are paperwork.
Right. And I think of the long-term
And
care
that's
study.
harder. It's
Yeah.
really hard to see that, and it's really hard to see that with the state board seal on it. I mean, I look at that and I'm going, that is a hard stop for me. And I mean, that may not be anybody else, but for me, it's like, and I look up at the top and go, that's the health department. That's the health department. Never worked in the health department.
Yeah.
But-
I
and
can
I
see
don't
what you mean
know.
about like long-term care LPNs. I mean, you guys are.
I'm not long-term, I'm primary care.
Okay.
I'm actually in clinic
Okay.
and like I said, when it comes to injections
Mhm,
and treatments
mhm.
and teaching,
Yeah. One of the things too about public health is a nurse that works in public health is cross-trained in many, many different areas. So you might be doing disease investigation in the morning, and then you may be doing STD, family planning clinic, or running out to the juvenile detention center that afternoon. So there's a lot of different areas that they're cross-trained in. And so I think that's part of it too. RNs have to work very autonomously in the public health setting because there's no doctor on site. Sometimes there's not an APRN on site, especially the smaller health departments. The APRNs are typically used for family planning exams, usually annual exams for women. And some of the small health departments don't offer those appointments every day. So they might share an APRN. And so the RN is the highest level that would be at a health department and is doing multiple different things. So that's what makes it a little bit different too. And there has even been a push, even within the last 10 or 15 years, that any RN hired at a health department should be a BSN. That I don't know if we're going to get to that again because of, you know, the staffing situations right now. But they feel that the critical thinking skills with so many different areas and your patient is your population rather than that necessarily always just the one person in front of you. That is something I think that the American Nurses Association has pushed, but is it realistic?
I
So,
wonder if it would help address Audrey's concerns. This, now that I look at it from your lens, this page, if it was taken separately, looks like it's summarizing duties of those two positions, and it doesn't state scope of practice decision tree for the RN and LPN practicing in a public health setting or something, you know, on this document, the separate decision
grid or-
tree.
oh,
You know, if it is that, am I understanding that right? This,
it just,
because
It-
this
it
is
really
what we're
just-
talking about. This
yeah,
is
it
just
just-
in the public health setting. that
yeah,
this
it is
decision
just the
tree
public
applies.
health. It just really doesn't seem like the RN, I mean, I don't see where the LPN's able to do much of anything.
So
And-
we're looking at pages 10 and 11, the decision
Yeah.
tree, okay.
Yeah, and like I said, I'm sure that the LPNs are very helpful for them.
I think it's pages 9 and,
I'm looking at 10.
oh, you're looking at 10?
Yeah, I'm looking at 10, down at there where it says, stop LPN must always have appropriate supervision. I'm not sure exactly what that means.
Well, I think earlier in the document, if I remember correctly, it defines that the nurse, the professional nurse determines what that level of supervision needs to be. And coming from a school perspective, in delegating, that may mean that I don't need to be physically there. They may be on a field trip and you have been trained, you're knowledgeable, and I can depend on you to do it. The accountability ultimately falls back to the RN that's in charge of that. But many school districts have maybe a single RN for the entire district and
And
LPNs.
I
are
think I
all
can
like
understand that
Mhm.
from the school perspective. So that one's easier to
Yeah.
understand.
So to me, this simply meant that they need to have their due diligence in place, that they have trained, they have an LPN
Right.
that's able and trained,
Right.
and then,
Like I said,
yeah.
the school nurse part just flows for me because I understand that they really are working more independent.
Yeah.
They have to.
Or like an ICU in a hospital. We understand, we're not gonna make any of them calls. So there's just so many different areas that have changed so much over the years. I mean,
And it makes them stop to think that if this is not, and it even references, has the RN or LPN add education and documentation of competency in this area, if the answer is no, then you need to stop and get, and it doesn't say you can't ever do it, but it says you need to complete that
Right.
before you can proceed. And then if it's in place, then yes. And so each step of the way, it looks like it just double checks.
Yeah, this is definitely, the decision tree is more broad. But we felt like it still fit with this more public health specific document. But your interpretation, I think the way you explained it kind of makes sense to me, and hopefully that makes maybe a little more sense.
Yeah.
Are there any other questions? This time? Oh, it's after. I didn't realize we ran over again. I did very well on my committees.
I can do it.
We're gonna do a quick overview of the new regulation, review process, regulations.
For the fourth time today. No. If you go to page 39 in your packet, this is just an overview of the process that has to be done now for our regulation reviews, not statutes, regulations. There was a bill passed in 2022 in the legislature that requires state agencies to submit a report regarding an intensive review of their regulations every 5 years. We've always done a review every 5 years, but not intensive, not like we're required to do here. So our report has to be submitted by July 15th of 2025. They've taken the agencies and broken them down, and they tell you when your report has to be. Okay, there's 90 regulations in the Nurse Practice Act that have to be reviewed by June of 2025. So I can get the report ready by July. We did break them down into committees. The practice committee has 27 to review. You have the most of all of them. So anyway, staff sat down, leadership staff sat down and looked at this process and said, how can we make this work? Because it's very important that it is the committee and the board that makes this decision, not the staff. We can do the work and everything, but this needs to really come from the committee and the board to make these decisions. So you will see that there's some questions that you're going to have to answer. If you go to page 40, you're actually going to see the form that we have for you. Part 1 is going to be completed by the staff. You don't have to worry about that because that's like the history and stuff of the regulation. We can do that. It's part 2 that the committee members are going to have to come prepared with some answers so that the committee can kind of decide. And then what will happen is that will be given to us. Now, what has happened in some other committees, I've seen it done 2 ways. They either talk about it as a committee and come up with what they want the committee, or they've suggested that each committee member turn in their forms and the staff kind of put it all together. And we can do either way. But you're going to have to talk about necessity. Is the rule and reg necessary? Okay. And then does it serve? It should be serve an identifiable public purpose in support of state law? Yes or no? What has driven this is nationwide. There is a belief that there's over-regulation. So for the past 2 years, when I've taken rules, regulation revisions over to the Joint Committee on Administrative Rules and Regs, they have said to every agency that has been over there, every time, you need to be going through your regulations and you need to be revoking some of these. Everybody has too many regulations, too many regulations. Okay, so now it comes down to the committee and the board saying, yes, it's necessary that we have this one, and this is the reason why. If it's revoked, potential for revoke, number 1, briefly describe how revocation would affect Kansas. You only have 800 characters. And most of, not very many of ours are being revoked unless you decide that that one can be revoked. If you do, then you have to answer probably a few more questions here. And then you have the choice under additional information to put more information, a maximum of 1,200 characters there. You have a lot of regulations to go through. You have 27 to do in 5 meetings. So you kind of see what happened today. It's at the bottom of the agenda, so you're not going to get any of them done today. And if you're not able to get some of these at each meeting done, you're going to be faced with doing a special meeting to do just these, because we don't have a choice. This has to be done. And you know, I think the input needs to come from the committee and the board so that we can defend as to why we need these regulations, because once the report is submitted, then it's my understanding, I will have to go over and answer questions and defend what's being said there. So, we need to have very good justification as to why these regulations are needed. In our heads, they're needed, but we need to help them understand why they're needed. You know, just remember your mission. Public protection is very important. But so I don't know how you want to do it. If you just want them to just table everything that's on today and have it on for December. And that means you all need to look at those and you need to come with your answers to this. Because it's not exactly the fastest process, but unless you know a better way to do this.
Because we'll assign a few more than in December as well. Because we have
Say you'll bring more in December too, right?
Yeah.
Is it an either or, you revoke or don't, or is it, can you shorten or anything, is it, or is it just either?
Well, I think if you want to make changes, you know.
I'm not suggesting that, I'm asking like from their perspective, is it?
They just feel like there's just way too many regulations. I mean, I've lost track of the number of times they've preached this to me over there. There's just too many regulations. You don't need this, you overregulate. Okay, well, in my eyes, all of these regulations are for public protection. Because I've told them this when they tried to tell me that all clinical could be simulation. I said, I don't know about you, but I don't want somebody walking in, taking care of me and starting an IV on me who has never touched a human being. And they just kind of looked at me. So, I mean, I think you have to get it down to their level sometimes, as if we don't have these, this is the consequence that can take place. But I think if you want to look at the numbers, you know, like, for example, we probably have five or six regulations about different types of licensure. Okay, do we have to have 5 or 6, or could those maybe be put into one? I don't know the answer. I mean, these are things that need to come up and we can talk about. We can talk about with Charles and stuff like that. Because literally, if you look at some of those, I mean, the different types of licensure, those regulations are not very long, each of them. And these are just things, you know, I think you need to think of, but what I can promise you, when I go over there, they'll say you have 90 regulations. And I'm like, yeah, I'm very aware that we have 90 regulations.
So they're probably not as focused on how long the regulation is, just that there's so many different numbers. Like if they're gonna have to look at something, they want it all in one place instead of, okay, you gotta open
They
5 of them to figure out this one thing.
They do seem to focus very much on the number that we have. But I will just tell you, I took all the undergrad education ones over there, okay? I had to justify every one of those to those people as to why we needed those. So that makes sense to us, okay? CNE, I took them over there, very same thing. You know, why do you need this? Why do you need this? And I just told them, I said, you know, when we did the legislation for the compact, we tried to take the requirement for CNE away because a bunch of the other states in the compact do not require it. So you may have a nurse coming into Kansas, working right next to a Kansas nurse, And that nurse from another state doesn't have to have CNE, but ours do. So you're putting more burden on our nurses because they have to pay for the CNE, they have to take the CNE, and that was not received well over there when we tried to do away with CNE, because you've got to have this for public protection. You've got to have this for public protection. Well, other states don't, you know, but so I will just tell you that there's always a lot of questions over there. They're not an easy committee to go in front of, but right now, you just have to remember
I was
that,
licensed in Colorado for a short amount of time, and it was more of your employer was expected to keep you educated versus you having to do your CNEs on your own and submit it. Is how they always perceived it. So.
they saw
It does
CNE,
make sense too, so.
they saw CNE over there as the same as competency, which in my eyes, it's not. You
No.
can pay somebody to get 30 hours of CNE and not do anything, but they didn't comprehend that. You know, where it's really up to the employer a lot for the competency. That's not really what we do. We
Right.
do licensure, but they don't really get that. So I'm telling you this because I think you need to have good justification on here. Right now, the board is responsible for the regs. You know, you decide whether there's a reg or there's not a reg. Presently, that's the way it is.
Can we ask staff to flag any that they think are ripe for or more or I don't know, less?
Like when you get those calls that
necessary.
are like. This is called all the time, or like, we haven't heard anything on this one in a long time, or, I mean, that's really hard for you guys to pin down. Or if it's, when they call about this certain subject, I gotta look at 2 or 3 of them to answer this question.
So
I
what,
don't know if that's something that you track.
so what we've got now, we need to have the answers for by our next meeting. And when we get our new packet, it would be great if we came with answers
Yes.
on that also.
Because
We got our homework.
Because what will happen in December, when you bring your answers and stuff, okay,
Mhm.
you will turn those in to Linda and Hannah. They will work those up. You'll see those in March to approve, and then they'll go to the board in March.
Okay.
It's just, there's no way you can do these today and we can get them turned around for the board to see tomorrow. There's
Right.
absolutely. no
Oh,
way.
I just want to get my
Unless
homework
we have
plan.
staff here all night doing.
I just need a plan.
Yeah.
We did at the education committee, what did we do, 3?
We had 3 and.
And then we can.
Investigation.
So
But
you
like
workshopped those
APRN,
together
No.
as a team, or did you
We
do
had
it
to.
before you got here?
We
We workshopped them this morning.
Yeah,
We workshopped them
We were
together.
good.
Because
We
they
did the
hadn't
same
really
thing.
heard about this process, but I'm telling you, it slows things down.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It was ahead when they got
And like
here.
APRN, we didn't even get to them today.
We're gonna get it done.
Yeah,
So-
so,
Yeah, we need to-
These review forms that are in the packet this time, will they be in there as well? So
For the
we
next
can
time.
print them out and
Yes.
have them written down and prepared before we even walk through the door.
and we can give you printed ones tomorrow if you wanna take
You
printed
wanna
ones
do-
home,
I think-
so you don't have to print
I'll
them.
just have to keep track of it until December.
I was
Printed works really well for me.
I don't know if anybody else has that issue.
You may not, they may not have part 1 finished,
Right.
because some of ours are not finished, and that's okay, because we can do that after the fact. As long as you know the name of the, you know, like 60-17-110 or something, you know, if that's just put on there, we can fill in part 1 if that
Okay.
doesn't happen to be filled in.
And I,
I've already filled them in.
Ours,
Okay,
Before the, right after the first meeting, we've had
if
several.
we download
meetings to
this, we
figure out
can
what
type
we-
in what we need to type like you did yesterday.
Yes.
So if we
Is it
download
a
it, we can
P-
save it and it
writable
won't
PDF?
miss anything.
we have a tab at time.
It's a tab.
Oh, it is.
I can get that for you. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
and I think Carol made a great point to see what we can group together and what we can bring under an umbrella that is more, all the same,
Condensed.
condensed version,
Okay.
all the same, topic.
Yeah.
Like licensure. And we can even try to break them up into groupings of RN, APRN, LPN, and then just really condense them. So you have 3. Three very well known. Three.
Well, they will, the question they will ask, I can promise you too, is what did you cut out? Well.
See if you can find it.
I
That's not a good
take,
answer.
I just take all of you over there with me. Hey, you should watch it on YouTube when it's going on.
And our
It's
public
magic.
representative, whether she wants to be practiced on by someone who.
Yeah, totally. But I'm just telling you, that's the process, but we are open to suggestions if you can think of a better process, but no one has really come up with a better process yet, so.
And I think we just have our homework for December.
You do have homework that you're gonna have to do now.
Well, you did tell us that when we started.
I did.
We'll spend more time trying to write the process than actually getting anything accomplished. at
She
this
didn't
point.
mention there would be work.
There will be
She
work.
did. She
Yeah.
said there'd be work.
There's not yet, but they got through it.
Juliana's always said we're a working board, so.
Yeah. Anything else? I don't think so too. Okay, it sounds like we have the agenda set for December. Yeah.
Additional added.
Additional. We need to make sure to have your homework done for December.
Okay.
Anything else? If not, it is 4:17. It's Mr.
Thank you.
And thank you everybody for your service.